Well, welcome to the podcast, and I've got a very special guest. He does live all over the world, but at the moment we've managed to track him down. He's in Atlanta, Georgia, in the States. His name is Douglas W. Collins. He is a very, very successful business person. He's an expert in the media, and he's an expert in a few other things that are actually going to be very, very interesting to talk to and hear all about. Doug, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to be here. What a great show. What a great day to be alive.
Mate, how true it's true. So now you are a resident of the world, as you were saying. You love to travel, but you weren't always like that. Where were you born?
I was born right here in Atlanta.
Yeah,
Grew up in downtown Atlanta, a little neighborhood they call Virginia Highlands, and
yeah.
it's a great little place to be from. And we're like the right now you would say Georgia's like the Hollywood of the South. So we're making a lot of movies down here. A lot of things going on in Atlanta.
That's the mate. That's so true. That's so true. Were you a good student, or did you used to hide at the back of the class and plot something for the weekend?
Funny stories there. No, back of the class, not so much. My vision was going as a kid. So in the third grade, I got glasses for the first time, and I
Mm.
could actually see the leaves on the trees. But
I
it
can
took
relate to that.
probably a year before I memorized the eye chart. So I was sitting toward the front of the room where I could read the blackboard. And when they would do the testing, they had the E's and the
Yep.
various, this way, right, left, and so forth. And I memorized the eye chart. I didn't know that other people could clearly see that. But in answer to your question, no, I graduated college with honors. I was, um, you know, kind of
What did
ranked
you
number
study at
12
college?
in my class. So I did well. So
What was your study at college?
uh, chemical engineering is how I got started. Um, I was making a bit too much money playing guitar in those days. So I got a call from my agent, and they said, if you cut your hair and put on a tuxedo, and bring you out to Lake Tahoe for the Sahara Orchestra. And lo and behold, you can earn $1,400 a week and ski during the day and play guitar at night. And it sounded like a good idea to me.
Oh, so did you end up ever playing poker with any very, very influential people, or did you just chill out
Yeah,
at night?
funny stories about that too. Everybody in the biz, whether you're in movies or music,
Mm.
always ends up around a poker table.
Yes,
So
true.
I can remember we were playing with Sammy Davis Jr. And so
Wow.
we're around here, and we're playing poker, and he reaches up and he takes his glass eye out and he puts it into the pot, and he says, "I'm all in." And nobody had the heart to call him. I mean, really, what would we do with the glass eye?
That's true. That's true. So I was looking at your resume, doing a bit of cyber stalking on you, and what you studied at uni isn't really where you ended up. You've had a pretty varied career, but I was looking down here, and pardon me for looking down, but you've been in the media in one form or another. Yet,
Time. Yeah, yeah,
how
a
did
long
you end up owning and running a global network that provided live stream for businesses and for TV networks? I mean, that's very different to playing and having poker with Sammy Davis Jr. Now, come on.
You're so true, because I mean we did a lot of special events, and we raised a lot of money for charity and so forth. And then my wife and I went on a cruise,
Yeah.
and while we were on the cruise, we met a guy. We were all in the hot tub, kind of together, and so this fellow and his wife and my wife and I, got to talking about, well, what do you do? And he says, well, I work for NBC. My wife, being a great publicist, she says, well, what do you do there? He says, because we were thinking maybe we get one of our clients, on NBC on the Today Show. And he says, no, and he says, I'm back behind the scenes, but I invented this camera. And he put this camera in front, and it all runs through remote. And you can basically convert, because in those days they were doing satellite television, right? Well, this one converted the signal into video over IP, which is the same thing they do with voice, okay,
Yeah.
except they're doing video. So with a 5 megabit per second upload, which was high speed in those days, and it was just broadband was just beginning to happen. I looked at this, I said, I got to get me one of these, And so we came back and I talked to a couple of friends, and we decided to build a studio in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we basically went in direct competition with satellite, because when people were doing satellite, there was always a lag between asking the question and then you
Yes,
would,
there was, yeah.
because they were beaming it up and beaming it down. So there's always a little delay built into all of this. Well, we were immediate. Our delay was basically non-existent. And so we could take what used to be a $2,500 fee that they were charging to be on satellite. We could do that same thing over the net, over the internet, and provide a contributor directly to Fox or directly to CNN for, I don't know, $550 for that same segment. And we were covered in USA Today in money, and they called us the most advanced broadcast studio in the country. We were really
Wow.
featured. 6 photographs that were included in the article, and from there we really got a chance to see how the broadcast industry, just like the music industry and the movie industry, everything changed. And today you no longer have cable television, right? You're streaming everything.
Yeah, yeah.
It just we had to wait until broadband got out. But it all kind of goes back to before this. I was on the advisory board for a company called AtStream Technologies, and AtStream had a web-based platform, and you could actually take a video and you could upload the video, and then it would crunch it and so forth. And 30 minutes later, it was ready to be seen on the net. And so we were doing a gaming conference in Las Vegas, and we had Christy Brinkley that was there, and so we did a short interview with her, and 30 minutes later we came back, and she got to watch herself on on the internet, on using broadband there, and that technology was sold, and it became YouTube. So it was just kind of interesting, to see how technology has really changed our life. And today, here we are today, we're on a Zoom platform. You're in Australia, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're speaking to each other over the internet, just like we're next door.
True.
It's amazing where all of this has gone. It's one of the reasons why I got out of the broadcast studio, because during that time, I watched everything happen, and Skype came onto the screen,
Yeah.
came in, and so did FaceTime. And so, a
Is
lot of
Skype
this,
still around?
yeah, Skype's still around. Microsoft owns them, so we'll see. But most people do FaceTime. But the whole idea there is that instead of paying $550, you could dial these people up on FaceTime. And during the pandemic, when people couldn't go into studios, everybody was doing Skype or doing FaceTime, and people found out, like the CNNs and the Foxes of the world found out that people would tolerate what I would call a low resolution, broadcast image that was done on a cell phone. But that's where everything is today. Very few people coming into the studios and doing spots. So we moved on, and we're doing things now that are on the streaming platforms and just having a lot of fun with it.
Do you think I'm going to put the business hat on it for the moment. Do you think that business has been slow to take up video and everything that's out there? They can do it quite cheap. They can get their message out quite easy. But they were really the last ones to latch onto this when socially everyone was already doing it.
No, it's very true. And, they did some research. One of the things we tell our clients is, if you have a video on your website, for instance, it increases by 50 times the amount of visitors that you can attract to your website. It makes a huge impact. So you're talking about, everybody doing video today. One of the things which we'll talk about soon, but we have a book that we did on Alzheimer's, and an email today from NPR, and they sent me an article that they released today, where there is a dementia and Alzheimer's site on TikTok, and they're using this for caregivers to post questions, and why is my father wandering off, or why is he repeating himself, or these types of issues that you have are now being dealt with almost in real time using TikTok as a platform. I mean, it's amazing. You just hold your cell phone up, you speak what your question is, or you share your experience, you upload it to TikTok, and all of a sudden everyone's talking about it so much that NPR, National Public Radio here in the States, for those of you who aren't familiar with what NPR is, they covered it and did an entire feature piece on how TikTok is working on delivering solutions for caregivers. Amazing how
Yeah.
things are happening.
I met with my wife, our branding and marketing company, the other day, and the lady who runs it turned around and said, was it 30 to 50-second videos using Reels? And she's telling us you are to do this. You do it on your phone. She told us the app to put on the phone. So she said, Rob, you video it. It's like question and answer, having my wife turn around and doing did you know if you do this, we can do that? Do it, bang, straight up. She said, you will get more engagement between 30 and 50 seconds than you'll get on any paid ad if
Absolutely.
you're answering a question, and you do it all on your phone.
Absolutely. In fact, how-to videos right now. I needed to change a filter for my ice maker and my filtered water in my refrigerator, right? And so I was having trouble getting the filter to fit. So I went to YouTube, put in the GE refrigerator and how to change the water filter in this particular model. And there's a video for everything. It's just
I
totally
installed
amazing.
a CB radio into my four-wheel drive by going on YouTube.
So you still have a CB radio then? So you're still one of these breaker 19s? Huh?
Oh, UHF. In Australia, when we do charity car rallies and we're out bush, as we call it, there's no mobile coverage in Australia. I mean, you've been here, you know what the outback's like here. So when you're traveling as a group, we use UHF to keep in touch, and you can get a good 10, 12 kilometers just on a 5-watt UHF sitting in the car, and that can be look, it has actually been the difference between life and death for some people.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true.
And you can talk to all the trucks, so you're not overtaking dangerously. You just call them up and they call you through, or vice versa. So
Well, they talk about in the event of a Armageddon-like experience, which has been all over the news here lately, thanks to our president. The only communication that that you can really work with is going to be CBs. That's how you're going to get the word out. If you get a
Independence Day, that's all they use.
You get a electromagnetic pulse, and
yes,
it's going to knock everything out with a computer. But CBs, baby, those will always work and get the word out.
So one of your other projects has been, which really surprised me, you're involved in a medical company to do with type O blood. What is that all about?
One of the guests who came in to our studio when we had the broadcast studio was a fellow by the name of Dr. Anand Srivastava. And many people referred to him as the father of stem cell. He worked with Nancy Reagan when President Reagan had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He worked with Christopher Reeves, trying to use stem cells and so forth to regenerate. But he looked at the wall when he was a geneticist. So he looked at the wall and there was a gecko lizard crawling on the wall and it was growing its tail back. And he thought to himself, hey, if a lizard can grow its tail back, what can really be done this way? So he started looking at stem cells, and he'd already been in the field for 12 years when I met him, and that's 8 years ago. And one of the technologies that he now has patented has to do with taking stem cells, and we're not talking about embryonic here. We're just talking about basically the fat
Mm.
cells from your body, and what they call a mesenchymal. And you take those cells, and then you put them through a process. In 48 hours, you have red blood cells, and those are human blood cells. They're O
Wow.
negative blood cells, and it will basically cure the blood shortage in the world. And so I and Dr. Anand came to me and he said, we'd like you to help us with some strategic planning. And so we're doing that. And we're getting in the process right now of doing a public offering of this company. It will be on the London Stock Exchange very shortly. We actually have a token, what they call an NFT, that is out right now on the platform, where people can actually buy a coin, and that coin can be redeemed to use stem cell treatments. But the company is called Geostar, and they have 7 hospitals in India, and they have clinics all over the world, and they're doing marvelous things with cancer, with diabetes, with
Mm.
arthritis, with Alzheimer's. They can actually repair and regenerate the neural cells when they're damaged in the brain in the short term memory area. The problem is getting an early enough diagnosis where you can
Yeah.
take care of that. Normally, when you're diagnosed for Alzheimer's, you're 2 to 3 years into it, so you may not be able to do that. But they're doing marvelous things, and being able to do the blood. I mean, right now, on a good year, we have less than half the blood that we need around
Correct.
the
Yeah.
world. And when the pandemic hit, people were scared to give blood. So it
True.
just exacerbated the problem. We had 15% of the blood required for the U.S. Army. If you look when Putin did his entrance into Ukraine, and he was planning on coming in, one of the first things he did was move blood supplies into that area. I mean, you don't think about it, but as people get injured, they need blood. And when you're in a trauma situation, you don't always have time to find out if you're A positive or AB negative or whatever
Mm.
you may be. You can't type it. So the best thing to have is O negative. And the blood that they're being able to do from the stem cells has a 2.5 year shelf life, which
Really?
compared to the 45 days that you have now, 2.5 years is a godsend. So yes, I got involved in the project. It's my engineering background really kind of appealed to it, the science side,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things, as you get to the later stages of your career, you're always looking for legacy projects. So
Yeah.
you get out there and you try and do things that make a difference in the world. So whether it's raising money for charity, raising awareness for Alzheimer's, or introducing a new technology that could cure the global blood shortage in the world, these are the things, these are the places that you want to spend your time and your efforts, because as I say, it's a leaving a legacy behind, or as we would say, make a ripple. And
Yes.
you definitely want to make that ripple toward the end of your life. You want that to show in the water as you come along. So
Before we get into the book, when I was a lot younger, I was actually taught by some very, very successful people, and they were successful in business, but they also were very wealthy from it, which that's just one level of success. You can be successful anywhere. That if you have the ability to make a difference in someone's life, be it through money or through connections, you should always do it. Now, I've been blessed with connections, not with the money side, but and I've always used those connections to make a difference to people's lives. Do you think a lot of business people don't leave a legacy, as you just said, and don't use those brilliant connections they've got that'll cost them no money, just maybe a lunch and a bit of arm twisting to say, look, can you help me with the community? Can you help me with this passion? And it's all in
you
front of them.
no, you're so right. I have a dear friend, for instance, and her husband right now is has been diagnosed with dementia.
Yeah.
And so I sent her a copy of the book and the workbook, and she found 2 or 3 things that made an immediate difference in her life. And you never know. It could be something as simple as a smile or a word of encouragement.
True.
But each one of us, you're in Australia, I'm in Georgia, and here we are bumping into one another on the internet, and so you end up saying something or sharing something that makes a difference in someone's life. And there's just, I don't know, as a musician, you sometimes would get a request for a song that had special meaning. You always played that. You were able really to influence people with the quality of music.
Oh,
Today
so true. So true.
today I have a musician friend whose mom was with Alzheimer's, and his brother said, you need to come down. It's her last minutes. So he comes down. He's the guitar player for Firefall. So they did that song, You Are the Woman That I've Always Dreamed Of. That was his mom's favorite song. So he starts to sing it, and she comes out of a coma. And for about 2.5 hours, he has perfect clarity with her. So don't
Awesome.
underestimate the power of music. It can reach in there and just drag you back from wherever you settle in your doldrums, in your dungeon. Music can bring you right back. And so, I mean, it's
Yeah.
wonderful things you can do.
I was lucky enough growing up to drink at a pub in Sydney that none of us lived anywhere near it. And everyone that drank there came from all over Sydney. But we were the ones that didn't fit the status quo. We were like square pegs and round holes. But this pub, and I'm sure you've played and been to these places, was something very unique. The same guy played every Friday night for 12 years. At the height, he was absolutely massive as a solo artist. But when you're talking about music, we all got in there and we were safe. And we all knew the words, and we
Yeah,
all knew, we sung along. He even lost his voice one day and turned up with the guitar, and we just sung for 3 hours.
yeah.
And the music, I mean, just brought everyone together. It didn't matter if you were wealthy, what color you were, where you were from, good, bad, ugly. It didn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. No,
And everyone just
absolutely.
sat there and had a good time.
Rob, my wife and I just spent 2 weeks in Dublin.
Yeah. Oh,
So you
jealous.
mentioned the pubs, and so we walked into a pub, and they're doing Sweet Caroline, and everyone is on their feet, and they're all on the dance floor, and they're all going, so good, so good, so good, and you realize that all over the world, that music has this tremendous impact, and I mean, it really, really does. And you're right. I worked in a band that was called Salt and Pepper, and I was the salt. It never occurred to me, that we were anything but musicians, and we were playing
Yeah.
music, and nothing else matters. I mean, uh, you know, that's where the purity of everything you do, when you have that creative spark, and you get with other people who have creative sparks, all of the things that you use to kind of judge people kind of fall by the wayside, because we're all creative and we're making music, and that's all that's important.
One of the oldest parts when people come to visit in Sydney is called the Rocks. Now it's down the bottom. It's full of old sandstone buildings, pubs,
Yeah,
restaurants. It's where
yeah,
that was the first port in Australia.
yeah.
But every pub on every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday has music. And if you're coming to Australia and you're coming to Sydney on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon, we've got the big Irish pub down there. We've got a few others. You can get in there, and honestly, we get down there, and there's people from around the world,
Oh yeah.
and you can be singing Neil Diamond, you can be singing Billy Joel, you can be singing, and then we sing a few Australian songs, and they look at us quite strange. And then you'll be sitting there, and foreigners don't realise that Australians have this habit of changing the words. Uh, never be next to an Australian if living next door to Alice comes on, because she'll be quite offended if you don't realise what we're singing. But it brings everyone together, and it you're so right. You're so right. Talking about bringing one together, And you mentioned it a couple of times. My auntie actually has Alzheimer's. She's quite advanced at the moment. She was with my uncle. How did you get involved in writing the book? And how did you get involved in such a challenging disease and a challenge for everyone who has a relative that's on this terrible journey, to be honest?
Well, you know, I mean, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
So we have a good friend that we worked with, I don't know, maybe 25 years,
Mm.
and he's a national book reviewer. And he had seen kind of the preview copy of this book that Lisa Skinner had written, called "Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's: Its Secret
Yeah.
Faces."
Lovely
And
lady, Lisa.
yeah, yeah, it was a tremendous book. So he listens a little bit to her story, and then he realizes that everyone that she had gotten involved in the project were basically taking money from her and maybe not delivering what they had
Yeah.
promised to deliver. And he says, "You need to talk to Doug and Di Marie." And so he put us in touch, and then she and I talked, and we just, when you're an author, especially today, there are over 1 million books. With this self-publishing now, the publishing industry is just like everything else. It's like, streaming music, streaming video. Well, it's ebooks and
Mm.
being able to self-publish your book. So everyone with a story can write that book and get it out. And so she had written this book, and she needed some help monetizing it because it was a significant investment.
Mm.
And she'd been told that if she didn't write the book, it would be selfish of her not to share all of this.
Yeah.
So I took a look at her book, and I realized that she hadn't addressed any of the issues of COVID. Now they're finding out they had 6 million people they did a clinical test on, and they find out that people who recovered from COVID, seniors who recovered from COVID, are now 30% more likely to get dementia or Alzheimer's than they were prior to the pandemic.
Any
30%
reason
more
why?
likely. Now that it all has to do with the immune system, and just because you recover from COVID doesn't mean that your lungs are back to normal, or your kidneys, or I mean, everything in your body was affected by COVID. It
True.
wasn't just the fevers and the congestion and things like that. I mean, it affected everything. So a lot of that is what they now call post-COVID. So I said, we need to do a chapter about COVID. And so we wrote that chapter. And I said, I have a friend, he's Phil Vassar, and he wrote the song "It's Just Another Day in Paradise." And during COVID, his mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and they wanted to put her in a home because he travels all the time, he's on the road all the time doing concerts. And his mom says, "I'd rather die. I
Mm.
want to see my children. I want to see my grandkids. I don't want to go into a nursing home." And of course, then that we were just realizing that putting people into a nursing home, I mean, you couldn't attend their funeral. I mean, it was
Yeah.
bad during the pandemic. So he brought her home, and he wrote a chapter in our book called "Bringing Mom Home," and it's delightful to read, you know, someone's personal experience and personal story, about doing this, and it's worked out well for him. So we added that into the book, and then we put a few other things into the book, and then we linked the book into the Alice in Wonderland stories, because I believe that Lewis Carroll was suffering from some form of dementia.
Mm.
So we did a lot of links, and we ended up with a book and a workbook, a series of webinars, and now we have an audio book. And I just got lucky because I met this wonderful author, and I was able to contribute. She made me a co-author, and I did a lot of work, especially on the workbook,
Yeah.
putting things together. And now you start taking a look back. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. My father-in-law, had dementia, and Alzheimer's is a form of dementia,
Yes, it is. Yeah.
the most common. And now you end up with the next really global medical crisis. A lot of people don't know this, but they just published a report, came out about 2 weeks ago. And right now, the number one cause of death in the United Kingdom, in
Yeah.
the Netherlands, and in Finland is Alzheimer's.
Yes, I heard that.
It is more than cancer. It is more than heart disease. It is Alzheimer's. And you figure right now, every 3 seconds, someone in the world is getting an Alzheimer's diagnosis. There is no early diagnostic test to test for it, and there is no cure. So when you go in, you get your diagnosis, the doctor tells you, tells your family, get your affairs in order because it's always fatal. So, I found myself basically looking at something that could be the next global medical crisis. I have a chance to make a difference. I have a chance to share some information. I have a chance to make caregivers' lives a little bit more uh, easy to navigate all the challenges and the behaviors that they're going to see. And it's a long haul. So when someone gets an Alzheimer's diagnosis, Rob, I'm sure your aunt has probably had this for a while. You're looking at 3 years, 5 years, 7, 9, 10, 11
Well,
years. I mean, it's a
as you would
long,
know, she's physically fit.
yeah.
The
But
mind is,
yeah,
yeah.
but it goes on for a while. And the whole family gets Alzheimer's. I mean, that's kind of what I mean, everyone around you, just like I'm sure you and your wife,
Mm,
everyone who knows your aunt, especially your uncle, who's probably a primary caregiver, but
he is.
everybody deals with this. Our publisher for the book, Mike Parker with Wordcrafts Press, he's had 6 people, immediate family. So he had his father, his 3 uncles, his mother, and his mother-in-law. His mother-in-law now lives with them. His mother is in the hospice stage of her Alzheimer's, and father and 3 uncles died from Alzheimer's. And we asked Mike, is there something that you can share because this seems to have really been in your family? And he says, I think it would be nice for people not to judge, and he says sometimes you just need to get away. It's like an elephant in the room. You wake up with Alzheimer's, you live with it all day, you go to sleep, and it's still there.
Yeah.
And it's a remarkable thing. So anyhow, we've had a chance to do the book, and we've gotten some feedback. And our book review, our national book reviewer, called it groundbreaking. Great stories, things that laymen can understand, and the books have been going very well. It's now a bestseller on Amazon, and we're going to be forming a worldwide community on a special internet-based, a web-based platform called Circle. And we're building a caregiver community, and it's called memorycaregiver.com. So we're designing that right now. We hope to get that launched in the next 60 days. And we'll have all sorts of resources that people can come and, they can learn how to be a better caregiver, learn what they have to look forward
Yeah.
to, and all the other things. I mean, but it's one of these things where I feel like I was given a chance to make a difference, and it was just an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. So I
And
stepped forward. I put all of the things about Alzheimer's and the challenges and so
mm,
forth. I put them squarely on my shoulders, and I start walking forward, looking for solutions. And so I'm proud of the book. I'm just extremely proud of what we've done.
I met a gentleman on the weekend who lives on a vineyard. It's his family vineyard, and his father's got Alzheimer's quite bad, and he had to go away or do something. So he put his father into a facility while he was away, and he bought the room while he was there. So there's a room there for when he gets to the stage where he can't look after him. And of course, it didn't work very well because he was confined in a room, structured, and all that. So he took him back out, and he said now he's on the vineyard, back on the farm, in areas that he knows. He goes wandering. We find him in the Sauvignon one day and the Chardonnay another, but he's totally relaxed
Yeah.
and
And
he
happy.
feels safe. And he said, so he's not leaving here until it gets to a point where he's a danger to himself. But at the moment, he's not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you're talking about Alzheimer's, we had a good chat to him on the weekend. And this guy's struggling because he said he lives with him. No one else in the family does. And people forget Alzheimer's isn't just a person who's got it, it's also the caregiver. The enormous amount of stress that they're under, trying to look after themselves and wondering where their mother, their father, their brother, or auntie are, is huge. And I think
Yes.
sometimes people forget that.
Yeah, Rob, I'll tell you also, it's like my publicist, her grandfather, is going through that right now with Alzheimer's,
Mm.
and she has young children. So she has children that are 10, 11, 12 years old, and they know something is wrong with their grandfather, right?
Yeah,
And so you have to learn, basically how do you talk to them? How do you tell them how to behave? When they forget something, or
mm.
or they have a hallucination, or they
Mm.
begin to wander, how do you react? And I mean, it's a multi-generational. Most places in the world right now are not like England and
Yeah,
Australia and the United States. You go to say Central and South America, people don't go into homes, they don't go to facilities, they bring those people home.
they do.
Fortunately, Latinos are 50% more likely to develop Alzheimer's. They don't have the skills, they don't have the access to the medical community that they need, medical access, and they know nothing about the disease, and there's very few resources. It's one of the reasons why we published the book in Spanish, which has been doing very well. It's a great resource now. So, because they bring them home. So
Well, as you know,
grandmom and dad, they
yeah,
they live with mom and dad.
yeah,
The kids live there. So you've got 3 generations, sometimes 4 generations living in one household with nobody that you would consider qualified to be a caregiver.
just lots of love.
I mean, it's a crazy situation here. So we needed to do something, and
Yeah.
so hopefully I've made a difference. It certainly it's one of those things that kind of keeps you going, each and every day. But as I say, I'm very proud of what we've
I
done.
think just talking about it, Doug, makes a difference.
Oh, it does.
It does.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, two quick questions. What would you tell your 20-year-old self if you ran into them walking down Atlanta?
What would I tell them?
What would you tell your 20-year-old self if you ran into them?
You know, Looking back, a lot of people say they have regrets and so forth. I find maybe even when I stumbled, and we all stumble,
Yeah,
uh, that I learned from every one of those experiences. So um, I find myself maybe looking back, um, I would have told myself that I have a tremendous life, a lot of opportunities that are going to go my way. The biggest thing that I did back when I was young was I found out really what my path was in life. And I spent a lot of time, trying to understand really what I was supposed to be doing. And I had a head-on car accident when I was 34 years old because I'd gotten off that path. And after that kind of a near-death experience, um, I started getting back on my path. And since I was 34, I've been walking that path. And I find that there's no shortage of opportunities. Everything that you really need finds its way to you. When we need a new client, the phone rings or an email comes in, and there's my new client. It's a matter really of kind of finding your place. You were talking about square pegs and round holes.
yeah,
Let's find round holes and round pegs
yeah,
and find out where you really fit in this journey of life. And I feel very fortunate that I've really found some areas that I have quite a good fit.
yeah.
So if anything, at 20 years old, I probably would have wanted to find that path a little early. But I married my wife when I was not quite 26 years old.
I was
Uh,
25
yeah,
when
well,
I married my wife.
and I got married to her in 1977. We
Wow.
celebrated 45 years, and I feel very lucky that you find someone who's your equal and someone to share that with, and it's made all the difference in the world. Really, all the difference in the world.
I couldn't agree more. It took me a while to find my path. We drank at that pub because society pushed us that way.
Yeah.
So, and it was a safe place. And we're still friends, a lot of us, and still friends with the guy who played there. We do get together without organising it quite often. And when you're talking about music, he does play a certain song that only means anything to people who drank at the pub or are part of this big family. And it still brings a tear to our eye. But that music just make a massive difference. If I
Mhm.
said to you, you could have a beer or a wine or a nice food with two people that you've never met, because you've been very privileged to meet a lot of very famous people and people that make a big difference to people's lives, who would you share the meal with?
Well, it's a good question. Um, I lost my dad in 2016, so
Yeah.
I'd love to spend some more time
So would we all with our dads?
with him.
Yeah.
But there just seem to be a lot of great people out there. There's a friend of mine named Dr. Eileen Boris, and she wrote a book about called Finding Forgiveness,
Mm,
and she's doing a new book now that talks basically trying to heal our nation and the political divide that we have.
yeah, true.
Um, I'd probably like to share a glass of wine with her and see what sort of a solution that she can see, um, from that standpoint. But it's I've been, as you say, really blessed to have hung out with Hollywood
Mm,
celebrities, raised a lot of money from charity, and then worked with a lot of famous musicians and so forth. And um, you know it, I probably haven't met anyone beyond that. As I said, I'd like to probably find out what Eileen's goals are right now, and I'd like to maybe share another glass of wine with my dad. So
yeah. Well, my dad would be the same. So much so he was storing my good wine, and after he passed, I went to go and get it, and he drunk the whole bloody lot. So you know,
that's how you're supposed to leave this world. Forget leaving the money to the kids. Spend it.
I wasn't worried about money. We've told my wife's parents, spend your money. I'm not worried about that because
Yeah.
money means nothing.
No, it really doesn't. It's not. It's not what. It clearly doesn't motivate me. Otherwise, I'd be somewhere else. In
Mm,
terms of money. But we've been lucky. We've lived a life that's been really really good. And I will tell you, I got a chance when I was playing guitar to work behind Harry Blackstone Jr., really famous magician. And he taught me some magic tricks. I guess those have really stuck with me all of these years because one of the things that I make certain that I do every day is I look for that little bit of magic that's out there. And it's there every day, every moment of the day. There's a spark of magic that you can connect to. So if you just learn how to find it and recognize it when you see it, and then reach out and grab it and hold it close and internalize that magic, makes your life better, makes the people around you, makes their lives better too.
that's an awesome way to finish today. Where do people, if they want to reach out and say g'day, find you, Doug?
Well, I'm all over the internet, so you can, the best place to come really is to go to Doug at dmproductionsllc.com. reach out on LinkedIn. I'm Douglas W. Collins on LinkedIn. And then our book, truthliesalzheimers.com. There's no apostrophe in that, so it's truthliesalzheimers.com. And you can just kind of Google Douglas W. Collins, and you'll find me all over the net. Unfortunately, I guess I've done a lot of things that Google thinks is important. So
Of course, it must be important.
I haven't had the nerve to actually do a Wikipedia page on myself yet, but over the years, maybe one of these days I'll do something like that. But Rob, it's been absolutely wonderful talking with you. First time we came to Sydney, we stayed at the Sheraton Hotel right there on the rocks, and that was just marvelous. And took my wife to see La Boheme at the Sydney Opera House, and I have the fondest memories of Australia. And as I told you earlier, I even spent some time in Tasmania. So I guess the devil made me do it, So it's been
Well,
fun.
I'm going to wrap it up there. And as we say at the end of all of our podcasts, have a groovy day.